Okay. So when I communicate about these matters, non-duality, awakening, realization, experiencing truth directly, I always, of course, talk about my own experience. And my own experience is constantly restructuring itself because that's the nature of realization. So I'm very aware that any conclusions that I state, they don't really hold water. And part of the integration of my, awakening, the way it happened in this experience has been to try to put it in words. So for quite a while I was in quite non-conceptual state. I mean, for quite a while, at least a year, I was processing, like the body mind was processing what had happened, but it was very hard to form any kind of coherent narrative about it, and it was still happening actually. So the actual shift, it launched this whole I don't even know what to call that, all these phases of realization that kept unfolding, so that kept happening for a year or two, and it still does. And I guess in a certain way it always will, because it's not about crossing some final line and then establishing some sort of a mode, which is, realization. It's not really like that. I know it may sound like that, but you don't really establish anywhere. That's exactly what's not there anymore, that there was something that used to stabilize itself in the experience, and suddenly that's no longer there. Okay, so the identity structure that used to be used to offer, some sort of landing ground for the experience in various forms. So when that's not there, you really then enter experientially this very bizarre and very paradoxical mode of experiencing, where there is no continuity of identity. So it's almost like there are these various versions of reality, and they each have a kind of life of their own, and then at some moment there's a kind of I'm looking for the word that I can't find it at the moment, but it's like that the whole patterning of the matrix is reconfiguration. So there's a reconfiguration in the pattern of the whole, and another version of reality appears. So it appears with another version of you could say Vivi, and looking back at my life, I can kind of see in certain way like countless iterations of this particular theme, that is a theme of this incarnation, which is not a person, so when I hear the name Vivi, it's a little bit strange experience because it doesn't feel like that refers to me. And I guess that's why some people, they change the name after they have the shift, because it just, the old name, it carries all these connotations of the heaviness of the person that's just not there, and it never was there. But when you hear the name, it can still evoke those conditioned echoes in the system. And so when I had the shift, I took the name Siandini, and I still like it. I don't officially use it, but I like it because it has that freshness, that it doesn't carry those heavy connotations, that the name Vivi seems to evoke sometimes. But anyways, so I was speaking about these different versions of reality. And I guess one way would be to call them different paradigms, So there were different paradigms of identity. So that's one way to look at the whole awakening journey, that there were various forms of dreaming. And then the awakening happened, the Great Awakening. Even it was a specific moment, and I've told the story several times now in interviews. I still don't really understand at all what happened there, and it's still hard for me to actually talk about it in a way that would capture the infinite depths and nuances and all the information that was released through that unfolding of that release into the absolute, into infinite. That fundamental letting go. So that's where I'm now. I feel that everything I've said about it, it's bullshit. It's just not it. And it doesn't come even close. It doesn't come even close. And in many ways, maybe it would have been better not to speak about it at all. I don't know. This is the way it happened in this experience. I found articulation very helpful for me, and I think there's also something valuable that it can transmit when it's fresh, the awakening, even though there can be that particular naivety about it, I guess, at that phase. Because you're kind of like a newly born, and you're just so open and so vulnerable and at the mercy of everything. And eventually I discovered that just like the dying was actually a whole of a lot of deeper process, even there was that specific moment. But all in all, I think the whole dying process started to occur already a decade before that, and it still continues in many ways. So in the same way, this process of birthing, something being born, even though there was a specific moment that I still find very, special the way it happened, this experience, this sense of everything being suddenly experienced like a first time, like with the freshness, like, and purity of perception that's beyond words. It's like eternity experiencing itself in everything, and it being born, in this human form. But eventually I discovered that this birthing seems to be a whole never-ending unfolding of its own. Like, I keep feeling now how it still continues. It has these different phases, and some of the phases are more contracted, and some of the phases are, there's a lot of release, a lot of expansiveness, a lot of bliss. And in the contracted phases, there's discomfort and resistance patterns in the body, and some deep karmic patterns, that seem to be in the process of dissolution. So I found myself again in this new version. It's like the reality kind of rearranged itself again, and suddenly there's this new version, which doesn't seem to have much to do with that whole awakening story, that my system has been processing, for 3 years now. It happened 3 years ago, but it really feels like an other version of Vivi, who was processing all of that and speaking about that. So I find it very interesting, this particular phase that I'm now, because it's again completely new and unknowable. Not much information about any of this stuff. Just like, pretty much everything that happened after the big shifts, like not much information about that. But where I'm now, it's not something, spectacular. It's really very human. And the work, the shadow work, is also very human in many ways. So that was an interesting discovery for me, that no amount of non-dual insight and just feeling into the luminosity and transparency of sensation and thought, and the absence of self and the absence of other, just the deepening of the insight of anatta and emptiness. So no amount of that type of exploration, which I think was valuable on its own way, like definitely, and it still continues. But it could not address specific issues at the relative level that that kind of block the energetics in the relative level. And it took me quite a while to be able to understand that, And I think there is a lot more information now about this embodied aspect of non-duality, and about the dangers of this type of dismissive non-duality that dismisses the human experience and bypasses the human experience and presents the awakening as some sort of well, magical means out of the human experience, as if it would be just, wouldn't matter at all, you know, whatever issues at the relative level there are, for the lack of a better word. There's so much emphasis that, oh, there's no issues, there's no problems, everything is just okay as it is, and so on and so on and so on. And I don't even want to go into that subject right now, because I want to really speak about this embodied aspect of lived non-duality. And now when I speak about embodiment, I speak about it in terms of realization, deep realization, because that term embodiment can also be used in so many different ways to refer to various types of somatic practices, you know, approaches, healing modalities that bring you more into the body from mind identification, and that's all great. But the way that I talk about embodiment in this context is from the perspective of having the absolute insight, or the insight into the absolute nature. And, you know, not as a glimpse, not as an experience, but really this inconceivable depth and dissolution of all sense of self, of all form. So myself and quite a few others that I've eventually got to know speak about a re-entry into the humanness after there has been a kind of usually very immersive period into the absolute, in whatever way that happens, into nothingness. Some people, you know, experience it like that, into infinite unborn and undying kind of ground of being. So this particular phase, which is so beautiful, and I do want to talk about it at another video. So this particular phase, I guess it can last for quite a long time for some people. You know, for me it lasted a year or two, but I know some people that it can last, you know, like a decade, or like it's so interesting, because how would you know even that there's anything further? It doesn't really seem like that while you're there. And, you know, you are not there because the sense of me, I is gone, but there is this like primordial, just vast, you could say, womb-like spaciousness, and it's like the manifestation is kind of like emerging from that, but, you know, the dream is kind of like arising from this infinite unknowable vastness, and now you know yourself to be that. So it's like you're outside the dream while inside the dream. And one metaphor that I like is that this realization of the absolute is like this singular drop is merges into the infinite vastness of the unknowable ocean, you know, unknowable, fathomless ocean of unknowability. And then this re-entry to the humanness is that the infinite unknowable vastness kind of re-emerges into a drop, into a singular drop, and in that act they are both annihilated. So there's no more drop, there's no more ocean. there's just this kind of ordinary human experience is like you go full circle, and then you kind of arrive exactly where you started, but something seems to be fundamentally different. And at this point, all this non-dual language actually starts to become pretty irrelevant. It's like, it's just not a big deal anymore. Yeah, there's no boundaries, there's no substance to anything, there's no solidity. There's no ground, there's no base, there's no time, there's no space, no distance, no dimensions, no here or there, no center, no periphery. So all of that's, there if you care to feel into it, but it just doesn't anymore feel that relevant to try to understand it or talk about it. Unless you're a teacher, then maybe you talk about it sometimes. But other than that, it just it just seems much more proper, that the experience is actually very normal, and it can be spoken about in very normal terms, and that includes the human psychology, and which is again very different, even though it's the same. But there's no need anymore to emphasize, that non-dual nature of it. It's actually much more beneficial in many ways to engage in a shadow work that really acknowledges the relative nature of the experience. And then there's so many ways to do that, because the relative landscape is infinitely complex, nuanced. So there's so many ways we can kind of address certain issues at the relative level, issues for the lack of a better word, energetic blocks or challenges, contractions. And in a way, you feel everything fully, like so fully, and in such a nuanced way that is almost unspeakable. And at the same time, it's like not really feeling anything, really. It can sound really bad, but that's actually that freedom that is always there. It's not something that needs to be thought about, or it can't be thought about, but there's a fundamental difference to that mode of being from separation of being, experiencing yourself as a human being and all that, because yeah, I can't really even at this moment remember it enough so I would be able to empathize with it and speak about it. But there's a difference between that and this. So after the awakening has done its job, so I like to think of awakening like a, medicine. It's the medicine for the illness of mistaking yourself to be something that you're not, and then you take the medicine, and if it works, then you have all kind of effects, and that's the awakening process. But when the medicine has done its job, you're left in just these natural states, is not a mode of separation, but it's not also some sort of a spiritual or divine or elevated mode of being. Like some spectacular and otherworldly phenomena can still appear, states can appear, but the basic nature of reality is it's just astonishingly ordinary. Astonishingly ordinary, this where this all kind of seems to land, at least where I know, where it seems to land. And like I said, it's constantly restructuring. So